So a while back, I was asked on the gear page. Actually, I was after posting one of my Line 6 Helix tone series videos. I had one of the users there. I can't remember his screen name, but his real name is Dan Ray. Contacted me on there and brought up an interesting point. He said that he was really enjoying the videos and he was learning a lot about how the parameters all worked as far as the effects and the amps and the mics and everything goes. But he said he was still having a hard time really dialing in the sound that he wanted to hear. And I think he even alluded to the fact that he didn't even really know exactly what he wanted to hear. And that got me thinking that maybe some people are still, despite knowing how things are working as far as the parameters go, maybe they're still having a bit of a tough time dialing their sounds in. So he brought up an interesting point. He says, what if he did a series of videos where viewers or readers, depending on where they've come across the videos I've been doing, submit their patches, their Helix patches to me, and with a description of what they're trying to get, or maybe even particular song examples, which is what Dan did. He gave me particular song examples of what he was trying to kind of come close to for the band he's playing with. And I could make suggestions and just do a video on how I sort of tweaked their patches to make them more in line with something that they maybe wanted to use in whatever context they were using, whether it be recording or live work. My first reaction to that was to say no way, because first of all, I don't want to come across as if I'm thinking that I know better than anybody else as to how their sound should be. This is such a subjective topic, right? Everybody's going to have different opinions about how things should sound. They're going to hear different things in their head. What I'm going to dial in is going to be very different than what other players will dial in. And there is no right or wrong. I've had people say to me, "Oh, I don't like this tone that you did," and then fine, whatever. It works for me. I'm going to keep it that way because it's what I'm comfortable playing. So my first reaction was to kind of shy away from that, but Dan brought up a good point where he kind of said the opposite. He says, "Yeah, but that's exactly why." He says, "I don't know what I want to hear. I don't know what I'm looking for, and I don't know how to get there, So he says, I really anything would help. So I thought, well, I thought I could do it as long as I was given a good description, and then also with the built-in protection of, if you don't like this, let's just not do it, right? So anyways, Dan sent me the patches, the patch that he had made with some notes, very detailed notes, which was amazing, as to what he was looking for, and I just dove in and started tweaking it, mostly the way I would want to hear it, using his guide and what he wrote to me as a guide, but I really could only dial it in the way that I would probably want to use it myself. Anyways, I'm going to dive into the patch here and go through the changes I made, play a little bit with the original patch, give my thoughts about it if anybody's interested in hearing what my thoughts are on that, and then play sort of the alternative patch that I came up with and the changes that I made. I have a bunch of notes in front of me here that I made about the changes because there was a lot of little changes I made. There was nothing too ridiculously major as far as a lot of the parameters go, but there were a couple changes that made a big difference in the sound. So let's dive into that. Dan was also very kind enough to send me some video clips of his band playing on, I think it was the night after I sent him the patches, or the same night, or I can't remember what it was now, but he used them with his band. He said he really liked them and everything worked out great and he felt really good about it. So that made me really happy and made this whole exercise a little more worthwhile. Is this going to become a series of videos? Maybe it will. If others are interested in taking part in this, we'll see what happens. We'll see how the response is. And, I'm game for this type of thing. It was actually a lot of fun. And it felt really good to be able to help somebody in the right direction on getting their tone closer to where they wanted it, So let's dive in. Dan sent me a patch, which I have up on the screen here. It's based around the Line 6 Cartographer, Ben Adrian Cartographer amp, which wasn't an amp I had really played a lot with, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to do that as well. But here is a picture of the patch that Dan had sent. Now, Over here, it's called main, and over here, it's main edit is the patch that I created. So, you know, at face value, you notice, okay, there are a couple little changes, some stuff with the cab here, but you don't really see a lot of the changes in the parameters that I messed with. So let's just jump in and talk about some of the global changes that I made. Let's go back to the main patch that Dan sent me. He had, up here you can see, 6 snapshots. He had a clean, a crunch, one he called slappy, which was sort of had a slapback delay on it, one with an auto filter, which was, he describes me as wanting an auto wah sound on that, a modulated clean, and then a lead sound, which I believe he said he was looking for kind of a searing lead sound, something with a lot of, you know, like a David Gilmour-ish almost, you know, is what he was saying. I believe for the clean mod, he had mentioned the intro to Purple Rain. And I don't have those notes in front of me, but he did give me very detailed notes with song examples. Some of the songs I'd never heard, I gave him a quick listen. And again, I wasn't trying to match that. I was just more trying to get the feel of, from what he gave me and getting it closer to that, okay? So we'll start off with the clean patch. Now, this is what Dan sent me, and there was some obvious problems to me as soon as I heard it that I knew instantly how to go about fixing. So here's just some chord playing. Now, I don't know if you guys could pick up on that, but right away, what I heard was just an overly compressed sound. And I think that really that was the bulk of Dan's problem on this patch. In my compression video, I discussed in detail all of the parameters of how a compressor works. What you're hearing here is a compressor that, as far as, in my opinion, and others may differ, again, I don't think that, you know, my way is the only way to be done, but in my opinion, these compression settings are doing more damage to the sound. And here's why. Compression is going to do one of two things for us. If set properly, it's going to actually, in my opinion, allow our sound to cut through the mix more and to be heard more, but in a very balanced way. And the reason I say that is, if we have no compression at all, especially on a clean sound, when we hit a chord, that initial chord hit, that attack, can sometimes show up kind of as a spike in the audio, right? And cut above the mix. And therefore, because it's spiking so much and it's such a sharp attack, anybody listening, it's kind of jarring to them. So a lot of times what we have to do is turn our amp down. And then what happens is not only the attack of the note, but the body of the note or the chord we're playing also goes down. So it's kind of, now we go, I can't hear myself anymore. So we turn up and we still have that spiky kind of attack, right? So a properly set compressor can help us to control that initial attack, but let the body of the note still come through. So we could actually then, with the proper set compressor, turn our overall volume up. We're going to lose that sort of spiky attack at the beginning, and it's going to allow us to turn our volume up to be heard more, to cut through the mix, but without those annoying spiky artifacts. So that's a properly set compressor. What's happening here, though, is you'll notice as I hit a chord, the initial attack is almost gone. And then as I hold a chord, you'll hear the compressor release in a really unnatural way, and the body of the chord comes up almost louder than the attack was. I don't know if you can hear that. It's kind of that breathing sound that you get from a poorly set compressor. So right away, I could see that was the problem. It was really killing the tone here. So one of the main changes I made, if you notice here, Dan had the red squeeze set at the beginning. And then he also had kind of what I talked about in one of my previous videos about setting up tone, sort of this mastering section with EQ and compression at the end. The only problem is he was using the kinky compressor. So he had two fairly aggressive compressors that you don't have maybe as much control over, set in a way, if you notice here, the attack is at 0. That's just killing that attack, right? Here it's gone, and it's really not going to cut. So what I did in the main edit patch is I came in, oops, I'm sorry, that totally moved to something else. All right, so what I did is I came over to the main edits patch, and I changed the first compressor to a deluxe comp, where I would have a lot more flexibility with the parameters the way I wanted them to be. And at the end, I did what I mentioned in my last compressor video, or actually one of my tone videos, that I put the LA Studio comp at the end, just set to a very subtle compression, more as a glue. We don't want to hear that as squashing our sound. It's just more to bring it all together and make it a little bit more cohesive. So if you listen to this clean sound now in comparison, if you notice, you don't get that unnatural kind of breathing coming back in. You still get some controls of the peaks, because on the first one, I still set the attack time fairly fast at 1 millisecond to grab that attack, but my threshold isn't set so heavy that it's just grabbing all the note and squashing it right down. In fact, when I'm hitting softly, maybe the compression is not even really doing much. So there's the clean sound that I set up, and really, other than that, I did not change much. So Dan had a great initial setup going of his amp tone, which he dialed in with these settings, and you can see how they're whited out into snapshot mode here, because there are going to be some changes that both Dan and I made, depending on what snapshot we're on. So nothing wrong with his settings here. They're perfectly fine. Everything else was really good. One other global thing I did, so other than the compressors, I changed, if you notice, from he had one cab with a ribbon mic on it, pulled 7 inches back. That was perfectly fine. I kept that. But what I did too is I added a second cab, which was the same cab as he had on, a 212 Interstate, but I put, 212 Interstate with the 160. So I kept that exactly the same as he had it. And then I added another one of those cabs with a 67 condenser. And then, how did I blend this here? I blended it a little more to the condenser side of things, I believe. Yeah, I did. So, that's just what worked for what I was trying to accomplish for the sound that he was describing to me. So still some ribbon. I didn't go with a dynamic mic because I didn't want it to get too harsh. Still kind of smooth. He has his low and high cut filter here that I left. The other global change I made that kind of affected all of the snapshots was I went a little less aggressive on the EQ here. He has a Kali graphic sort of in that mastering section at the end. There was nothing wrong with that. It's just that as I was dialing in the sounds, I think I dialed back some of the mids. He had them up a little bit higher, I believe. Let's check that for sure. Yeah, you'll notice 750 hertz. He had up plus 6 dB, plus 3.7 in the bass, and what did I do with that? Yeah, C plus 2.5 at 750, plus 4.1 in the bass. Just a little bit of a subtle change, maybe a little less aggressive on that. So that's kind of what I did as far as the global settings, and that really is what affected the clean sound, and what you heard is the difference there. So if we move on to snapshot 2, if we go back to Dan's patch and go to this is his crunch sound. Now he added a little bit of delay to it. Which one of the things I believe I did is I brought the delay mix back a little bit compared to what he had. It's this delay here. The Elephant Man, he had it 18%. I think I might have brought it back to 13% if I'm not mistaken. He had the compressor on. I can't remember if I actually kept the compressor on. I did keep it on as well on that, because it wasn't a really heavy crunch sound, so we still wanted a little bit of control. The amp parameters, all I did because of the compression change is I think Dan had it set the channel volume at 9.7 here, and I believe I brought that back on the crunch to 9. I'm sorry, I don't know if he had it at 9.7. Let's go back to his crunch here. He had it at 7.5, right? And I brought it up to 9 just to give it a little more, because of with the compressor changes I made, I had to rebalance some of the volumes between them. So here was Dan's crunch sound. again, it's so compressed, you're almost having a hard time hearing what the tone is doing and even how crunchy it is, because it's so squashed. Here is the crunch sound that I came up with. Cleans up nice when you hit softly. So a very nice tone. He just wanted that edge of breakup where he could dig in a little bit more, have it break up somewhat, and then not so much if, you know, he's hitting it softer. So, and also I think he might have wanted to use that for a bit of some lead sometimes. You guys also might be wondering why I'm using a guitar with the P90s, because Dan told me he was dialing this in for, obviously not the same Godin guitar I'm using, or even necessarily the Duncan P90s, but it was a P90 equipped guitar. It's the closest thing I had, so I figured that would be a good thing to use. So that's basically on the crunch. I just, again, changing those global EQ settings, changing the cabs around, getting rid of the heavy compression, and I think that was the sound that Dan was probably looking for closer, and he was happy with it. So things worked out good. And he, just like he did, he had the kinky boost on that as well. I don't believe I made any other changes as far as my notes go. So let's move on to snapshot 3. We'll go back to Dan's again. And this was his slap back, basically. So again, there was a slight change in the amp's channel volume just to accommodate the difference in compression and whatnot. Nothing major. Very subtle difference here again. I think I may have tweaked the on the delay, just the scale. He had it at 75%, and I think maybe I went up to sorry, it's this one here. Yeah, 100%. And I think I maybe knocked the mix back. Dan did mention to me that was one thing he noticed that night, is that he had to crank the mix up on that just because he wanted more slap effect in the mix of what the band was playing. So I mean, again, and of course, you know, I would expect him to make some tweaks off this. This is me sitting in my studio room, totally unrelated to anything that he's going to play, you know, different attack and whatnot as well in the way we play. So it's going to be a lot of variables that he tweaked around on, that he can tweak around on, and even improve it more than what I possibly could have. So again, the main difference between these two, again, is just going to be those global changes I made, the compression difference, the cab changes, the EQ changes overall, which I think just improved all of the snapshots instantly and made them all more accessible. So here was Dan's slap 1. Sorry, turn the volume up. Again, so much compression there that it's hard to hear what's going on, right? So if we come over to my version of that, okay, and again, not a huge amount of slap back there, but again, Dan can adjust that. You know, we could just simply come in here, crank the mix up on this. You know, and it's going to work better for that slap, kind of a. Right? So that's fine. Again, just the global changes I made are what's going to make a huge, or what made a huge difference on that patch as well. Then that brought us into the auto filter patch, which Dan wanted just kind of like a auto wah type of a thing. The reverb it sounds almost louder than the direct sound because the compressor, again, is squashing it so much. The changes I made on this is, I did make quite a few changes just to his auto filter settings. I won't go too depth into that, but I think I brought the, let me see the notes here. I brought the mix down quite a bit so it wasn't so, such a dramatic effect. I also messed around with the frequencies and kind of narrowed that down. I came up with... Okay, so basically, again, getting rid of the compression, messing with the cabs and the EQ, got the sound more where we wanted it. I played a little bit around with the auto filter. And I think, again, Dan was pretty happy with that setting. Just gave it more of a wah effect. And again, this is so open to personal preference. By no means do I think that this is the only way it should be done. I just had to come up with something, and that's what I came up with. Okay, let's move on to snapshot 5, which was a clean mod. Now, not too much wrong with that, other than, again, that crazy amount of compression on it that was kind of squashing things so much. What I changed that to was this. Now I can play with more dynamics, right? And not have the compressor kind of kill that. I can dig in. So Dan had mentioned to me that the intro to Purple Rain was what he was kind of going after with that. I played around a little bit with his phaser. He has a phaser and a chorus on here. He had mentioned to me that he found that when he took somebody else's patch and maybe tried to edit it to get what he was looking for, he found that he lost his stereo field. It narrowed. It didn't sound as wide and spacious. One of the things I did notice on his chorus is he had collapsed the spread down to 0, and I changed it back up to 10 just to give him a little bit more of that stereo spread. Some of the phaser settings, I went a little more with the spread on that as well. Really not much difference there. He had the chorus dialed in. I kept the chorus rate the same, and it was just mostly the spread more than anything, and that just gave this sound. And again, Dan was very happy with that. And again, a million ways we can do this. I'm not even saying that this sounds exactly like Purple Rain. I don't really try to dial tones in exactly. I think there's too many variables involved for that. You know, when we hear a tone on record, or even live for that matter, that tone is sitting in a particular mix, right? With a particular mixed drum sound, with a particular mixed bass sound, keyboard sound, maybe strings, whatever other elements are involved. All of those elements mixed together are even going to affect how we hear the guitar tone. So to sit there and think that we're going to be able to dial in a sound and have it sound the same way once we're with our band, which is going to be a different drum mix, different bass mix, different keys, vocal, everything is going to affect how that sounds. So I really shy away from that idea of I'm going to dial this in to sound like the record, you know. I try to get something that in the spirit of that sounds close, that's going to work for it, and then be happy with it and move on. Okay, so that was that. And then the final one is he had wanted a nice, almost David Gilmour-y, he used that. He had a couple other descriptive terms for it, but it's like a nice searing lead that he could use for not just a Pink Floyd tune, but just an all-purpose kind of general decent lead. This is what Dan had originally for his lead tone. Now again, you hear what that compression does at the end. The delay repeats kind of jump up at you because the direct sound has been so squashed. He did something interesting here. He stacked 3 overdrive pedals, which I thought, great idea. I mean, nothing wrong with that. That's a really cool thing. You got to make sure that you're not overdoing it. But I found, other than the compression problem here, it was a little bit too edgy, right? And I thought cranking that up at stage volume, I don't think it's going to be a really full sounding tone. I think it's going to probably have a little too much edge and could be on the edge of being a little bit almost annoying and piercing. So I kept his simple concept of doing the stacking the distortion pedals. I had no problem with that. Obviously, we turned the first compressor off. We don't need it for this patch. I did take, let me see the notes here. I took his delay mix and I automated that with snapshots up to 24. So if you notice when I go to, say, crunch, that drops to 13. And when I move to lead, up to 24, just to give it a little more of that delay echo for the lead tone. The one other thing that I did do is I used a little bit more of the amp cartographer's drive 1. I changed that from what he had. It was 2.4. I brought it up to 4.1. I used a snapshot to bring the bass up to 5.8 from 3.7, the mids up to 6 from 5, and the presence I brought up to 5.5, okay? Which might sound like a funny thing to do if I found the other tone edgy, but what I also did is I went to the overdrives and I bumped the tone back a little bit on the hedgehog, and also I believe the overdrive tone here I brought back to kind of get a little bit of that edginess away on the Clawthorne drive. So overall, I think it warmed it up a bit and made it a little more like what Dan was looking for. So I was happy with that lead tone. And again, if we compare that to what Dan started with, in the lead, I think you can hear weird things going on with the compressor, and that would have been a very hard thing to get cut through a mix, whereas this tone, I believe, will cut a lot better. So, with the starting points he gave me, I was pretty happy to come to that final conclusion. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little few clips of Dan actually playing with his band that he was so kind enough to send me. It was funny because when I sent these to him, he got them and he says, "Hey, I'm going to try these with my band tonight." I was like, "Please, please, please try them at home first before you do that. I don't want to be the guy that causes you to be cursing at your gig when these sounds don't work and are nothing like what you wanted." So he tried them at home and he felt comfortable with it. So he did a gig either that night or the next night. I can't remember what he said. I think it may have been that night, but anyways, it was, he got back to me the next day and he was really happy with it. He said, "We got some video clips," and he sent those to me. And I mean, it's just camera audio as far as I understand. So I mean, it's not going to be like hearing a studio mix, but it gives an idea of how he used those tones. So.
Trying to
So basically, that's how I changed these up. I don't know if that's of any use to anybody, but it was a fun little exercise. And thank you so much, Dan, for the suggestion, number one, and for letting me take part in crafting your tone a little bit. And I hope you get use out of it. And you know, even if it's just a starting point for him to tweak and mess around with to hopefully get him to what he's hearing in his head or wants to hear. Faster. So, and again, if anybody else wants to maybe take part in this, I can't promise to do a weekly video like this, as I don't know if I'm going to have time for that, but I would love to do the odd video like this. So if there's anybody else out there that's looking to possibly do a similar thing, give me an idea of what you're looking for, and I can help tweak a patch if you're struggling with it. You know, a lot of people already know what they want. They're not going to need anybody to tell them that. And I want the last thing I want to do is be that person to say to somebody that, no, you need to listen to what I think is right. It's nonsense. This is so subjective. But if there is somebody struggling and they're looking for help, then I'd always be interested in helping out where I can, if I can. You know, if my view of how things should sound is the same as theirs. So you never know. It may just not work out with a lot of people, you know, but I think I was able to help out here, I hope. And like I said, so thanks so much, Dan. I really appreciate the opportunity. So yeah, if anybody else does, go to my website. I have my email there. You can drop me a line or leave it in the comments. And hopefully if there's anybody else who wants to do this, we can do it. All right. So stay tuned, guys. I'm going to have a lot more videos coming up. Helix-related tone series. Hopefully some more of these. I got my guitar lesson videos that I'm doing. Another one of those will be coming out very soon. And other than that, please subscribe and like the video and share. And I appreciate everybody's support. And we'll see you next time.